The following video explores a specific humorous scenario to prompt analysis. A funny AI take on authoritarianism designed to make you think.
This is on you. You ignored my warning. This is your own justice. This is yours. You both screwed up. Own it. We're all at fault here. Screwed up a protest response. The chief is a moron. Tell me about it. What now? We deal with it.
The chief and the mayor are morons. That the chief and the mayor are morons, and they are going to screw us over. I screwed that up. I screwed that up.
Yeah!
Mayor, I screwed that up. Mayor, I screwed that up.
You are a moron.
No one supports the police because the mayor is too political and makes political decisions that do not make sense. No one supports us because we have bad leadership. They only follow political orders, not legislative law.
Man, what a cool opener. Thanks for the developer that made that for me. It's pretty good, but it's got a good point. 2026, and a lot of angry people in society that yet do not understand what law enforcement is or how it runs, let alone the tie between the government, the officials, those that are seated in with law enforcement. That authoritarianism, totalitarianism, no one understands it. No one can actually break it down, even for those in the realm of law enforcement or criminal justice. It's a hard topic for them to really tackle. All right, we're on YouTube, having a bit of trouble on Rumble, so I don't know what it is, more Rumble trouble. That's why it's called Rumble. But we're live on X too, but I'm just monitoring YouTube for those of you that are watching. If you're watching on X, thank you. Do apologize. Break it down. CJTV is purely academic, as the actual opening of the show. We do not cover local news. We do not cover international news. We don't cover politics, political arguments. But in this show, we're going to tackle the identity of a few things that are terms that are used in politics, in the world of politics, as it relates to criminal justice, law enforcement, and public officials in general. So, chat is open. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear good. The mic's good. Any corrections we need to make here. So let's get on with this show. Also, everything that we actually do on CJTV is data driven. It's all research driven. So at the top, you're going to see right up here, Facebook, we have a media file, share file, all the research, all the assistant researchers that are going to be introduced here in the show before we actually close the show out. That's where all the research is. That's where my research is. Feel free, download it, use it for your own research. If you're a student at a university, or if you're law enforcement, psychology, sociology, whatever the actual aspect of public service you are, or whatever you're in as a practicing professional, it applies to you. And without further ado, the researchers in this actually, episode, trust me, they put in a lot of time and a lot of detail into this. Amanda Blankenship, Caleb Foster, Chloe Hensley, Dylan McDonald. So their email is up. I'm going to leave it up. So if you're watching this in the future, or if you just jump in and you're watching it now, or if you're, out there in click land and you catch us and you watch us, if you got a question about the episode, or you got a question about CJ, law enforcement, sociology, psychology, how it all blends in together, send one of them an actual email. They'll be more than happy to talk to you, more than happy to point you in a direction to where you can actually do true scholarly, credible, validated, reliable, set precedent research that actually has a foothold and is actually arguable within a legislative venue or judicial review, not just click media, social media. Totalitarianism. It's a government system. It aims to control all aspects of one individual's life, no permits, no individual freedoms, subordinating everything to the state. Now, a lot of people would say, hey, that sounds like communism. Well, there you go. Communism. Everything to the state. It's a characteristic of powerful central rule. The king, commoner, common law. We hear today in today's 2026, even pre-2026, since 1773, 1774, 75, the first renditions, first drafts of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the separation from totalitarianism, the king, the word, the control, everything relinquished to the state. It's a characteristic, powerful central rule, coercion, repression, and official ideology. The word of one, the belief of one system, the belief of an ideology that can be enforced by edict and rhetoric, but it still is coerced and it's still the system. Key characteristics, totalitarianism, and you have to understand both authoritarianism and totalitarianism before you step off into this venture called totalitarianism, the American Law Enforcement Agency. By the way, it's in the little ticker here, episode 50119-2026. Kind of looks like a case number or an R&I for all you law enforcement or CJ people out there. Totalitarian regimes, the man, the groups, the actual distinguishing nature, the core values, official ideology, guided ideology, providing the sole truth for the societal organization, the one stance, the truth. This is the way it is. This is the system. Be it governmental rule, be it speech, be it religion, be it morals, be it core development of oneself or family. It's the single party rule, a single party led by a charismatic, cool leader, somebody with suave words. The charisma, the charismatic, holds absolute control, the one. Look at Iran right now. They're going through the actual separation of totalitarianism, protests, riots, public executions, but from the information I got, that one was held back. The state of terror, often used with argument of the state of terror and the secret police, whatever the country would be. An example, historical venue, USSR, KGB. That's historical. Germany, Luftwaffe, all of the actual embedment of the German army during World War II, during the Hitler time period, pre and even post. The single party, the state, the monopoly, the force, and the communication. State control through use of propaganda, words, ideology, rhetoric, edict. But keep this in mind. Even though we use words like propaganda, rhetoric, ideology, and edict, to the official indoctrinated society of that one totalitarian direction, the number one rule, it's not propaganda, it's not edict, it's not rhetoric, it is the rule of the society. That is it. That's the organizational pretext. That is what the truth is, and anything that is outside of that truth that is perceived or developed is falsehood, false, not truth. The monopolization of it, force, coercion, even the communications of the state, centralized control of economy, who gets what, where's the money, totalitarian, total control, manipulation, collective memory. Now, when I say manipulation, collective memory, we're not talking about, episodic memory or recall or your memory moments as a child where you fell off your bicycle and broke your thumb or, hit your head and suddenly became smarter. We're talking about the collective memory, the state that manipulates the history and the language to maintain power. Now, some have heard expression, the winner writes the history book. The winner writes history. The winner of the conflict writes the history of the conflict because the loser lost. The loser is not in the position to write the totalitarian regime historical venue of a totalitarian takeover and or conquer. Look at wars, look at specific countries. So it's the state manipulation of history, language, the collective of the event to maintain power. Thus, the totalitarian cannot be seen as weak. Think of the king, King George. Think of the separation of the colonists, and everybody would think, through historical teaching in your schools, which is predominantly 100% wrong, that it was all Euro white colonists from a specific country or a specific location. Wrong. More than one boat. There were more than 4 boats. A time period. So it was a mass migration, not all one. So the separation of that totalitarianism. Examples, as I said before, Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong, however you pronounce his last name, but Mao, North Korea, the Kim dynasty, which is still happening right now in 2026, all right, Cambodia, Pol Pot, or that regime, all totalitarian, ruled under one structure, one entity. Totalitarianism is often considered an extreme form of authoritarianism. An extreme. Authoritarianism is a set structure, but not the level of total control. So you could compare the United States and legislative law, be it federal, be it the Constitution, as authoritarianism. It's authority. Executive, judicial, legislative review. But the totalitarian is way excessive. It's total control under one pretext, one ideology, one method, one language, one historical venue. Differing both. The aim, total control of the citizen, public, private lives, achieve specific sociological goals established and dictated by the totalitarian government or officials that are in charge of a society or the people in the region, country, city, wherever it may be. This is educational, so we're not going to sit here and say it's a city. Quite possibly it could be in a totalitarian country. While authoritarianism primarily focuses on maintaining political power. Yes, political power, not forced control or manipulation of the people by one authority, but authoritarianism is political venue. Therefore, it's more structured toward executive, legislative, judicial, law enforcement, the adherence to executive, legislative, judicial, the authoritarian responsibility of law enforcement as the first judicial review text, pretext, interview, interaction, whatever it is that one has with law enforcement, it's an authoritarian interaction, judiciary review at the concrete level, boots on the ground, and the incident during the actual response, the communications, the 911 call to, dispatch or command. A lot of people kind of, would like to think that 911 dispatchers aren't law enforcement. They're part of the law enforcement agency. So that is the first judiciary review, the information that's being fed to law enforcement officers or professionals that are responding to the scene that someone, is in need, someone's hurt, something's happening. And, we're keeping it bottom, common language here. We're not doing the upper echelon grad or PhD level, but we're just keeping it simple speech. Authoritarianism, the form of government or social organization characterized by the concentration of power in a leader or elites, the elected, the seated, the suppression of political pluralism. The suppression of it means a singular pluralism of one totalitarian nature, one totalitarian structure, but those that are seated are in control, and it's more than one that would be seated. Totalitarian, one regime, one order. Authoritarian, multiple. It's a elected seated, and we're not trying to have a constitutional, the actual constitutional republic, the fall of a constitutional republic, democracy, Democrat, a republic, Republican. We're not trying to have that argument here. It's all focused toward authoritarianism, the separation of totalitarianism as it applies to law enforcement. Restrictions, suppression of political pluralism, authoritarianism. Yeah, suppression of it. Even one says, well, the First Amendment is what protects it. Well, law enforcement has to abide by the First Amendment. Thus, in 2026 and pre-2026, United States Supreme Court has made not just opinions, but decisions that specific actions are covered by the First Amendment, freedom of speech, expression, be it verbally and be it physical. Even though, some people would say, that simple one finger represents a dirty word, it's verbiage. It's physical, kinetic expression of the word linguistically. And a big part of that would be a physical dilapidation. What would that be? Audible, deaf, hard of hearing. Now, something that somebody simply common-wise would not think would be the first thing that, hey, this is what somebody would argue, that the Supreme Court authoritarianism made a decision on a civil liberty that would apply. Because everyone sees that one totalitarian of me and how it applies to me and the commonality of society. Everyone can hear, everyone can speak the same language, everyone can interact the same way. Doesn't work that way under the authoritarianism regime and or government. The separation is recognized, but it rejects the democratic accountability. So, where's the question? This guy just said authoritarianism rejects the democratic accountability. Yeah. If you look at the actual true authoritarianism of executive judicial legislative law, it's a rejection of it because it's written by the people, for the people, formed by the people that actually vote for those that are in the seat of power under the republic of a nation, constitutional republic. The democratic practice of civil liberties, vote, statute, dismantling the institution doesn't apply here because it turns into political pluralism. It's the way it's supposed to work under the constitutional republic, under the word of legislative law. Thus, the Supreme Court opinion and decision and the separation of states being able to construct authoritarianism for law enforcement officers to enforce in the states at an authoritarian manner. The Ninth Amendment, not covered by the United States federal laws. Constitution, something that is unforeseen, that's state-bound and state-only. The state does have the power to self-regulate under executive body making legislative law for executives, law enforcement, to judicially enforce at an authoritarianism level enforcement, dismantling the institution of the checks that are ill-maintained and ill-controlled. I said ill-maintained or ill-controlled, meaning not controlled, not kept in check. Authoritarianism is supposed to do that. Yep, that's supposed. Now, supposed to. Does it? Does it not? It's up for you to make that choice when you see it. Centralized power. The centralized power of authoritarianism controls and rests with one, the single party, the single group, or even if need be, the military, when the military is used, often through, legitimate and illegitimate, sometimes coercive, sometimes manipulation. It's an authoritarian. It's not totalitarian to where you have to have a coup d'etat to overthrow the republic of the totalitarian. This kind of brings back the old historical venue of school. When we learned the Revolutionary War, where was the revolution? What was the totalitarian? The colonies were self-sufficient, having to fight with England and the free trade, but yet there was control, but the king still wanted free trade with the colonies after the conflict. And it wasn't like a short couple of days. It was, more like, over 20 years. But that's a historical pretext and a use of totalitarianism and the abstract authoritarianism at that day and time in the 17th century that did not conform with each other. The institution, the checks and the balances were ill-maintained in totalitarianism and recognized in authoritarianism. But yet authoritarianism is that political pluralism of a single party that is seated by the people. Centralized power control rests in that party, that dictator, that one person, that one entity. Suppression of dissent. Yes, suppression of dissent. Shut it down. Independent media, opposition, civil society. Weakened, eliminated, often through censorship, propaganda. We can go through propaganda all day long, and we can actually, go through select presidents all the way from President Obama all the way up to President Trump for propaganda use. We can actually argue each one for today in 2026, 2008, Obama, need to have ICE enforce the laws. 2026, Trump, need to have ICE enforce the laws. Somebody would forget the authoritarianism structure in a historical venue, yet again, used as propaganda, single party, media, oppression, dissent, civil society weakened through the elimination of authoritarian word and real use of authoritarianism. So it's a lot to take in. It's a big, huge fire hose that one has to really absorb before reality scholarly slaps one in the face and they learn something. Psychological manipulation and authoritarianism. Leaders use fear, period. They use fear. End of story. Your mom used fear. You do this, you're going to get in trouble. If you do this, you're going to get a spanking. If you do this, you're going to get grounded. No life, no friends, no nothing. Fear. Those of you that are Star Wars fans, fear's an ally. The weak know fear. The strong know fear. The rich, the poor. Everyone knows fear. Artificial threats, fear. Xenophobia. Now, xenophobia, like xenophobia, fear of foreigners. Yeah, it's used. It is used. Look at presidential elections, authoritarianism. You have a black president, xenophobia. You don't know nothing about the actual party. You know nothing about the person, but yet the authoritarianism practices of a party instill xenophobia, thus forcing one, if you're going to be a real scholar, to do your own research. You're going to watch the Republican Party, you watch the Democratic Party, you watch the Independents, you watch the Conservatives, you watch all of them to apply it to a law enforcement criminal justice aspect and an interpretation of what authoritarianism is and the separation of totalitarianism and the manipulation. Period. The manipulation. It happens even in 2026. This administration last, administration before that, you can find segment examples of everything that would be a key, characteristic, pro and or con, of authoritarianism in the comparison to totalitarianism through one party. Forms authoritarianism. Now, we've got to understand this before we step off into the law enforcement world of it. The one-party rule, the military rule, all wraps up into the hybrid competitive authoritarianism. The regimes, the groups, the parties, the entities that were seeded by the republic, the people, the ones that practice that word of authoritarian executive, legislative rule of law and constitution enforced by the judicial review, the vote, the elections, the elimination of the party that we, the people, do not want, the elimination of the party that we, the people of a city, during mayoral votes do not want. That's that, opening cool video. Some people would get offended and, the mayor, I'm a mayor, I'm this, I'm a police chief. Think of the conflict, the authoritarianism and conflict. Mayors firing police chiefs because of the authoritarian view, the one-party set, the one-party rule, the argument of this is my stance, my dictatorship, I'm the mayor, I'm the congressman, I'm the senator, whatever it may be. These are just small examples. But the manipulation, right? The ruling party, the authoritarian ship of it. Not like it's a boat, but it's the actual movement of it. Authoritarianism in American police departments. The balanced analysis. One has to actually do an analysis and then balance the detail, balance the structure of the information that you've got going. In police departments, it refers to a governance style characterized by a strong, centralized area of power, strict obedience to authority, thus standard operating procedures, standard operating guidelines, the Constitution, legislative law, training, knowing the law. An example would be the authoritarian of the police department and different divisions having separate standard operating procedures or guidelines or manuals of procedure in the structure of the authoritarian hierarchy. Chief all the way down to brand new, just got hired, passed everything, still haven't been to the academy, but you're employed by the police department, waiting on an academy date, and you're in the department, locked up in an office somewhere, reading policy and procedure, acquainting and learning the authoritarian hierarchy structure of the department that falls under an authoritarian hierarchy of executive, legislative, judiciary review. It's not rocket science. It's like climbing a ladder. As soon as you know the actual structure of an authoritarian society, a constitutional republic that practices democracy and uses democratic traits in democracy, then it starts to make sense. Common sense. Why do you think there's the separation of the Republican Party under the Constitutional Republic and the Democratic Party that focuses on specific items of democracy and democratic procedure versus the Republic, the Constitutional Republic? It's not rocket science, but these are things they don't teach in public school anymore, and sometimes very rarely at a college or university, to be honest. It just is what it is. The introduction, the balanced analysis. The model stands in contrast with community-oriented policing principles. So how does that tie? The community seats the authoritarian, the mayor, the city alderman, the council members, the votes, the authoritarian party selection, the drive, the push. What are the community-oriented policing problems and the principles to emphasize collaboration, transparency, simple respect for civil liberties? That all falls under the authoritarian principle of democracy, using aspects of the word democratic. Yep, aspects of the words. I did not say Democratic Party. We're talking authoritarianism, totalitarianism, constitution, legislative, executive, legislative, judicial, and the terminologies, and using them correctly and not using them as a political bargaining argument, but we're turning it around. This is criminal justice, not a political campaign, but one must understand the aspect of the political side to understand authoritarianism in law enforcement. Historically rooted. Authoritarianism is historically rooted in cities, society, state, local control, decentralized authority. If it's a state that would be a Democratic state, a Republican state, it's rooted. It's a decentralized authority or a centralized authority. One is voted out, a new one is voted in. Centralized, decentralized in the local control of the rooted historical venue of the authoritarian practice, the regime, the party, the group of people. Give me a thumbs up if this is coming across pretty good. The audio is good. Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. Do you think, most of society understands the difference between totalitarianism and authoritarianism? Put it in the chat. A simple yes or no. Does society understand the difference? Put it in a comment later if you're not watching live, or even think about it yourself or research it yourself. Like I said above, I'm going to take this down. These are our researchers: Amanda Blankenship, Caleb Foster, Chloe Hensley, and Dylan McDonald. If you have a question, rewind this back, get an email, send them the question. They will be more than happy to actually communicate with you, answer your questions, and episode research for all of our episodes. This one too. Facebook, Dr. Mike Gurley, CJTV, the Media Fire. Click it. It's open. It is free for everyone. Do not think that, hey, it's just for, researchers. It's free for anyone. Authoritarianism in law enforcement. Now we're switching to total authoritarianism in the American law enforcement agency structure. The development of authoritarian policing in the United States cannot be separated from simple, broader social movement, political claims, technology advancements. The key factors are in the authoritarian principle for law enforcement in today's society. We had a previous show, technology in law enforcement. It's an authoritarian need. It's an authoritarian enforced principle. Does the agency need money for more IT, more sophistication? Does the agency need more money for more perceived by society militarization, more equipment, more Bearcats, more MRAPs, more vehicles? It's a sociological problem. Community-oriented policing principles that emphasize collaboration of society so that society votes for specific people to be in the authoritarian position of a city, state, region, local government to give law enforcement authoritarianism support and power from leadership to the bottom. Yes, from leadership to the bottom. Mayor, councilman, police chiefs, commanders, lieutenants, sergeants, whatever it may be. Authoritarian. These factors, contribute. Gradual militarization of police force. Yep, you see it every day. Why? Simple authoritarian recognition of decentralized authority, centralized authority, local control, social movement, political climate, and technology advancements that are needed based on, national security, crime control, community policing, the community-oriented policing principles that emphasize the collaboration, the authoritarian side of the city, the authoritarian side of the county, authoritarian characteristics in policing. That's a whole different argument because of the public perception. What does the public see in law enforcement? What does society see in the public perception of, hey, this looks good or this does not look good? This looks like it's a control factor, or this just, I don't know, this is not really something that I want to be involved in. This is something that I do not want to actually see. This is something that I do not actually want to, witness and or watch. Weapons, equipment, through the 1033 program, which transfers surplus from the military to local law enforcement, agencies. Yes, 1033 program. Agencies, police department have maintained a, simple, adequate stockpile. And it's not, it's to where it's a, hey, we're going to argue this is a moral ought to, moral ought not. It's authoritarianism that has allowed it. Social climate, community policing, crime, controlling of the crime. Look at today's society, 2026. What do you see on TV every day? Protests, arguments. You see it against ICE, but if you go all the way back to 2008, President Obama addressed the same problem, the same words, undocumented crime, undocumented workers in 2008, but the authoritarian shift in the climate of society in a constitutional republic is manipulated, changed, moved by society, not by the authoritarian level of first jurisdictionary review or contact of law enforcement on the ground, but the authoritarian command of a law enforcement agency that is in authoritarian seat with authoritarian leaders of states or cities. Put it in the chat. Who's seen one of those odd, crazy, just sociological disruptive protests? And you wonder why. Why is the need there? Why is that agency there? Why is that agency responding with that equipment? Why is that agency responding with equipment gained through that 1033 program? Authoritarian control. Even one would say, hey, it's a city that the authoritarian principles of the city do not tie or equal with the authoritarian principles of the U.S. government. You still see law enforcement at some level in the city. Law enforcement may not be at the specific protest, but they're going to be in the city with that same equipment, that same gear. Excuse me, they're just not at that specific scene with that equipment or that gear. But the authoritarianism is still in the city. It's still in the state, just not on the social media camera in the moment. Authoritarianism is at its best. The manipulation of the political venue. It can be manipulated under authoritarianism using law enforcement, and law enforcement comply to the authoritarianism. That's the way it works in society in 2026. That's the way it works in the Constitutional Republic of the United States under authoritarian rule, regime. Not totalitarian, but the flexibility. Even the use of propaganda, the misuse of the political structure, the political argument, using society's view of a political argument to maintain control or stay seated in the authoritarian position. And the manipulation of law enforcement against society under authoritarian control. Happens every day. We're not going to sit here and, have a political argument of, left, right, Democrat, Republican, scholarly, CJ. You've got to understand these things, and you have to see these things, because the principle of it is you have officers, law enforcement agencies that are bound by state post standards state certification, not the mayor, not the city, not the governor, but the state post, state law enforcement in the state's legislative law, penal code, state statutes, whatever it may be, that are legally bound under that section of legislative written word of law to judicially review and judicially enforce the legislative law as given power by executives, those that write legislative law that give post standard or law enforcement certification for specific law enforcement entities, be it federal and or state, city, county, whatever it may be. Authoritarian practice. It's not rocket science. You see the argument of it every day on, social media. You see it in the TV. You see it all over the place. It's one of those things that quite possibly you probably can't get away from. Let me see what's going on in the emails real quick. Emails coming up. Yeah, if you got a question, you got a topic for the show, or you got something that, a scholarly level, something you want researchers to research at a real university, let us know. Shoot it to us, all right? And I'll bring these researcher assistants' names back up with some more emails. Or you can shoot it to me, Dr. Mike Lee, gmail.com. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and X. We're not, live on Rumble because we're having a few rumbly issues with, getting Rumble to work with their stream keys. But I got some IT people on top of that. Let's get back to this, though. Authoritarianism in law enforcement. Centralized authority, obedience, the control. Authoritarian policing emphasizes strict hierarchy structures. Unquestioning obedience to the authority. I said unquestioning obedience to the authority, not the misrepresentation of authority, misusing the word of law, legislative law, federal law. The structure, the hierarchy, emphasizes strictness, protocol, chain of command, limited discretion, SOPs, SOGs. There is legislative law. There is federal law. The hierarchy, the chain of command must apply to legislative law, the word of law, federal and or state. So the hierarchy, the emphasis, the structure, the authoritarianism. Unfortunately, today's society, 2026, and years, months before 2026, authoritarian existed, but it did not exist. It still today does not exist in the level of authoritarianism that parties like. Parties argue, parties fight. An example would be today, 2026, ICE. That's a big topic. But in 2008, one president said exactly the same thing, and in 2025, another president says exactly the same thing, but the authoritarian levels dispute over something outside of the argument of authoritarianism for a specific topic in law enforcement that utilizes the chain of command. Has to follow orders. If it's a violation of legislative law, be it state and or federal, then it's a violation. Period. Done. Over. Illegal immigration's been a law for over. And I teach constitutional law. I teach constitutional procedure. It's been a law for over 100 years in the United States. Over 100 years. But authoritarianism and law enforcement have limited areas of cooperation and discretion to work with each other because of authoritarianism levels of executive, governors, senators, police chiefs, mayors, sheriffs. For those of you that think, every sheriff is a law enforcement officer, I hate to break the bubble of, disappointment over your head. Not all sheriffs that are voted into the position of sheriff are law enforcement officers. They win it due to the authoritarian vote of progressive party, partisanism, how they represent the community-oriented policing. What I said earlier, problems in the community identified issues, community policing, the community votes for them. Hey, Bob is now, Harry now, Steve is now the sheriff of Jones, whatever the name of the county is, and that new sheriff could go to follow-on school training at the state to maintain or achieve or maintain state credentials post-standard for sheriff but that person is still a brand new sheriff and knows nothing, zero, of authoritarianism, totalitarianism, chain of command, limited discretion, internal culture, tactical training, nothing legislatively, but that one authoritarian position that is the chain of command of a sheriff that has no law enforcement experience. They're just a popular person. They just maintain that and get that standard through the state because they're a new sheriff. They still do not know anything about the legislative word of law and the emphasis on strict hierarchy of structure, unquestioning obedience. Now, when I say unquestioning obedience, I do not mean unquestioning obedience to Police Chief Tom. I mean unquestioning obedience to a hierarchy of authority, authoritarianism in the department that truly enforces the word of law, legislative law, federal legislative law, constitutional law, anything that would be a Supreme Court decision, even in a Supreme Court, opinion that's pushed back down, that comes down to the state level, the state review, the change, June, July, the publication, annotated, unannotated, as the laws come out and or set, out for the public to review, but the public still doesn't have access to them, but law enforcement and judicial review does. Well, just because the public does not have access to it, it's still released at the state level. State standards, state code, state penal law, state legislative law, whatever the state chooses to call it. Let's see what's going on here. Got some emails flooding and some questions coming in. Yeah, like I said, if you got emails, send them in. Please do. Send them in. Send them in. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. Got some people watching. We got the chat quiet. I guess everybody's enthralled about all, totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Maybe it would, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's because, somebody's figuring something out and learning the difference and how it applies to society. I'm going to cover a few more things. Hope everybody's having a good holiday, Martin Luther King Day. It's about over and it's cold. Information control. Information and control of the authoritarian area of law enforcement and the practices. Authoritarian policing typically involves restricted information flow, limiting the transparency. Yeah, limiting the transparency. Why do you think information is not given out about high-profile investigations? Something that's on the media that's a media target. Sociological construct of the interest of the incident, the crime. Brown University would be one. Anybody hear about MIT before Brown happened? Oh, it's kind of quiet. Some people knew, a specific percentage of the country knew, but the mass majority of the country that heard about Brown had no insight or no understanding of the relationship or the tie or the realm of concern for a dual investigation that can consist in tie and closure as one to close many under an authoritarian control of hierarchy. City, state, federal, tying in, pulling in resources, falls under an authoritarian control. Data concealment, withholding information about police operations, use of force, yes, use of force with intent of incidents until the internal affairs review has happened to find an understanding and or an identification of following SOP, SOG, manual of procedure, or violating and possibly violating a legislative law that one has to follow that hierarchy with undying doubt because the hierarchy is actually practicing the word of legislative law. And if a law was, broken by a law enforcement officer, then it, either bound over, transferred over, whatever the department or IA does to the prosecuting attorney, the DA and or federal district, whoever it may be, whatever agency it is, after review. Specific set tables of it. It's not hard to understand. Take your family's development, the structure in your family. Same thing applies. It's authoritarianism. It's the authority. Who tells you what you can and what you can't do? You never know. You have to ask one person. Who is the hierarchy in your family? Who's the authoritarian in your family? Transfer that over to a law enforcement agency. Pros of authoritarian policing. Now here come the pros. Unified command structure. Despite all the criticism in the United States, worldwide, Authoritarian policing approaches, the actual approach offers certain perceived advantages that have sustained appeal over time. Why? Because they still work. They're still here. Ever since Atlanta, post-Civil War, and slave law, when the military imposed it, there were no police departments, no structured police departments. Heck, there were very few U.S. Marshals at that time. Why? Because they were all killed, shot, killed, whatever, however they were killed during the Civil War. Unified command, the hierarchy nature of authoritarian facilitates rapid decision-making fast because there is a structure. There is a legislative, word of law. There is a manual of procedure, a standard operating procedure, a standard operating guideline that is written in reflection to serve the word of legislative law, and the people under authoritarian practice democracy using democratic principles. I did not say the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Democracy with democratic principles to seek specific people to create legislative law that the law enforcement agency enforces. The unified command structure, quick decision, coordinated response, emergency crisis. We, all understand this. We hear sirens and see it all, all the time, TV and in real life. But the centralization of it allows for a streamlined communication, authority, authoritarian, the execution of strategy without delay, impedance. Unfortunately, you see delay and impedance all the time in cities. What do you have? You have protests. We're not talking about the protests, pro this, like this, love that. We're talking about protests. They're not streamlined. There's nothing strategic about them. It creates an inherent delay in authoritarian response in crisis in the democratic system of democracy. The principles in democracy adhered to by a constitutional republic. It's not rocket science again. It's simple things that are in the Constitution, in the legislative word of law, state and federal. Even those states that someone would say, hey, that's a blue state, that's a red state, they read different. No, they don't. No, they don't. You can argue it all day long. They do not read different. I've read a ton of it for all 50 states. Why? That's my job. That's what I do. I teach it. They read the same. It's the authoritarian push of the authoritarian hierarchy that has been seated. Constitutional republic, democracy, democratic principles. I did not say Democrat. Democratic principles, equality, vote, not the Democratic Party. Let's move on to something cooler. Got the quick, fast, unified command. Now, keep in mind when we're going through this, this is not a substitute for a classroom, okay? This is like an hour and a half hit, hour and 15-minute hit. It's not going to cover a full 16-week semester. It's not going to cover a 4 to 8 plot 1, plot 2 semester for those of you that are at the university level or college level. And this is for everyone, not just university, but, primary focus here is scholarly argument, not political news media. And we definitely do not plagiarize from news outlets like 90% of streamers do. Fox is doing this, Fox shows that. They replay everybody else's stuff. Yeah, the research is done for them. They just get to sit there and talk and look cool because they haven't done any research. They're pulling it from their favorite sources. They haven't done any of their own work, scholarly, with credibility, validity, or reliability, delivered on a discovery of set pretense, period. There's no precedent to it. Resource optimization under authoritarianism and the law enforcement agency. Centralized authority enables more efficient allocation of resource. Yes, the breakdown. Where's it going to go? Where is it needed? The hierarchy, the structure, the MOP, the SOG, things we've talked about here before, the policy and procedure. Where's the money coming from? Who gets allocated the actual resources by the state and or federal funding when the money comes in? Where does it go? Now, I know what somebody's thinking. Oh, it gets embezzled. Hey, happens all the time. Crime, false pretense, fraud, authoritarian. You look at the problems up in, specific states. specific governors, specific authoritarian levels of partisan or nonpartisan, whatever, they want to call themselves. It's the youth of authoritarian control, the optimization of response, resource, deterrence, crime control, perception of strength, power, the visibility, the display of equipment. Those that argue, "Woo, all that military equipment looks scary." Yeah, but whenever there's an MRAP and an entire SWAT team around, you see anybody trying to rob the bank right across the street when they're there? No, you don't. So keep talking, sociological and argumentative without any authoritarian ideology or understanding of the deterrence of crime through perception of power under authoritarian set pretext. Now remember the actual, system of how they got that equipment. That was the federal government. The federal government. And if you think, well, one state has it, a blue state doesn't have this equipment, a red state has it, or a red state doesn't have this equipment, a blue state does, you're wrong. You only see what the media wants you to see, to see. That's why it's called television. It's going to tell you the vision that that specific entity of news broadcasting and media wants you to have a vision and believe. It's out there. You go to Portland, you don't see any MRAPs in Portland over there at the detention center. I guarantee you, I know they're in Portland. I know plenty of Portland PD SWAT officers. There are MRAPs in Portland. Yes, I know them. Talk to them a lot. Email, phone, text. I know cops all over the country. Yep, that equipment is still there. It's just not on that streamer's phone. It's not in front of KORQPD XYZ media because they're in one location. But that equipment's there. It's out there. It's out there. One would, figured, the authoritarian of the material. California is predominantly, the city's a blue state, but what do you see roll up when there's a hostage situation? Do your own research. Heck, go watch a YouTube video. Rapid response to threat, disruption of criminal networks, the authoritarian of disruption of the criminal gang, the criminal network, the criminal enterprise, aggressive surveillance, intelligence gathering, paramilitary operations, considered by some to be, contrast to civil liberties. Well, it's not contrast to civil liberties, the authoritarian approach to criminal action, violation of the legislative word of law, federal law. Everyone's got a complaint about it until it affects you. Then when it affects you, there's not enough MRAPs. There's not enough military equipment. There's not enough law enforcement. The shortages. We're doing a show here soon about the shortage of law enforcement. One would think it's 2026. Oh, there are plenty of law enforcement officers. These agencies are packed. No, they're not. They're hurting. Hurting bad. Why? Society's reject of authoritarianism, its own authoritarianism, whatever the party may be, the argument you have with your own. But it's that constitutional republic, democracy, the democratic principles, authoritarian. If you don't like it, practice some of that democracy and vote them out. Not rocket science. Enhanced protective equipment. Yeah, superior firepower. Good gosh, I hope so. Good gosh. What's going to happen, when you do go into law enforcement and you run up on that person that has more firepower than you? That's a scary day when that happens. Efficient argument. We're going to cover two more things here. Efficiency in arguing. Yes, efficiency in law enforcement, authoritarian arguments. Scholarly. SOG, legislative back, case law, case studies, set precedent of a judiciary review, a judge in a courtroom. Doesn't matter what, perspective it is. It's a judge in that jurisdiction. A judge. You may like it, you may not like it, but it's being used. If it wasn't being used and somebody in an authoritarian level wasn't petitioning the judge for the decision, why would that decision be overthrown by another judge under another authoritarian practitionership? Republican, Democrat judges. It's all CJ. It's all enforcement of the law. How do you think that person got to the courtroom in the first place? Interaction with a law enforcement officer, the first level of judiciary review based on a sociological complaint or report. It didn't just fall out of the sky on an investigator's lap or desk. It got there somehow. Community policing, problem-oriented policing, authoritarian review, authoritarian in society. Here we are. We're the police. What are the problems? That's like one of the problems of cities when the cities do not understand what's going on with the agency or in investigations. Whose fault is it? Well, Dr. Michael Gurley will tell you it's the police chief, it's the sheriff, it's the head of the administration, whatever the entity is, FBI, DEA, ATF, and it's whoever. It's the fault of number one. Everybody likes to watch the Florida sheriffs talk about how great they are, the grandeur, the authoritarianism. We crushed this criminal entity. Yeah, but you're not teaching anything to society other than do not violate the authoritarian principle of legislative law. You're not teaching society a thing. You're boasting. You're propaganding yourself as the threat for the violation of the authoritarian created word of legislative law. But society, normal society, non-violators of legislative word of law, county ordinance, city ordinance, whatever it may be, whatever the authoritarian rule is, those that are in society following the law and layman terms being the good citizen, you're not helping them. You're just boasting on your greatness because you're a police chief or a sheriff and you did something authoritarian, superior, efficiency and argument. Proponents of authoritarian policing argue that during crisis and emergencies, the rapid decision making, the skills in unified command structures inherent in a role model to save lives, disseminate information, collectively work together, and disseminate resources. Manpower, dissemination of manpower to equalize the dissemination of labor that is needed during a crisis incident, enabling swift, coordinated responses, efficiency in the argument. Who gets what? What's the command? Who gets the information? Go. Adherence to the hierarchy. That hierarchy should be hierarching, in layman terms, that efficient argument to society. What's happening? What's going on? I'm not talking about disclosing the case or critical details that only the offender and the victim knows. Bad person, an offender, a criminal is only going to tell you what they want you to know. The rest you're going to have to find out on your own. That's the authoritarian control of the criminal side. The criminal knows the control level. The criminal knows the efficiency in argument. The criminal knows the tactical, linguistic, kinesic, physical superiority for superior firepower and testimonial evidence. You, the law enforcement, lacking the ability to gain evidence because you're stuck in that authoritarian level of there's a restriction. Unfortunately, that's true. That's true in society. Law enforcement agencies are held to a restrictive level under authoritarian control of executive position. If you don't like it, vote them out. It's that simple. Now, I know somebody's going to argue, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, okay. Why are the states considered different colors, and why is there a sheriff in one state arguing that they will resist and aid in resisting a federal agency? We all know what I'm talking about here, okay? It's not a political venue show, but that does apply to authoritarianism and law enforcement. Where did that mentality come from? Where is it being backed? Where is it being influenced? Where's the authoritarian support for a female sheriff to say words to antagonize a federal agency or words that are conflicted to the mission of a federal agency and the federal agency that supersedes that county department? Authoritarian backing. That's where it comes from. Law enforcement officers, professionals, a lot of times they just do not understand the difference in totalitarian and authoritarian, the pros and the cons, the four cons of policing. The four cons under authoritarian: erosion of civil liberty and constitutional right. Authoritarian, yes, I said it. The erosion of the civil liberty, the erosion of the constitutional right. How? Specific levels of authoritarian executive membership. The party. Hate to break the news to you. All parties, regardless of what they are, Democrat, Republican, conservative, libertarian, whatever, independent, specific points of view. Thus you have the argument. Constitution. Yeah, the Constitution. You mean the republic, a democracy, democratic principles? Didn't say the Democratic side, Democratic Party. Didn't say the Republican Party because of a constitutional republic. We're talking about the authoritarian of the control of the structure of the hierarchy of and efficiency, knowledge level of the executive that's seated. It's a historical plague in law enforcement, politics, governors, mayors, presidents, heck, police chiefs. Yes, police chiefs, sheriffs, commanders that fall under that hierarchy of the department because they want to keep that job, because the hierarchy of the department has to serve the hierarchy of the city, the county, the country, whatever it may be. The erosion, Constitution, erodes away. Community distrust, alienation of the community. Kind of, falls back to what I said, in the example of, the sheriffs and all these agencies in Florida that you see putting out these cool videos. Look at us. We stopped, this drug smuggler and got all these kilos and stuff. That's the only time you see them. The only time you see them publicly. Does the community see that person? Does the community see that sheriff or that police chief out there in the community talking about things, teaching the community? Community-oriented policing. How the heck did that sheriff find out that was going on? How did his investigators or detectives get it? It didn't just fly in on tattooed on a crow's beak. Someone made a complaint. It was observed. Probable cause. Direct knowledge, reasonable, suspicion that can be articulated that a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is going to be committed. Something. But no, you're not getting that. You're not hearing that. Now, I'm not saying that they do not do it. I don't know. I'm not there in Florida with all of them. But it'd be cool to watch one on social media say, hey, we had this meeting with our community and this is what we did. This is how we countered it. And this is how we corrected it. The diversity, us versus them mentality. Yeah. Authoritarian. How many of you know a police chief that wants to keep his job or her job? It's you versus them. Kind of like I have, a little appreciation for, my buddy that, he's a law enforcement guy in a bigger city. Did the AI for me. Yeah. The police chief and the mayor are morons. It's a political venue push. How many of you that are in law enforcement, do you know police officers? Do you know that police chief in that certain jurisdiction is under authoritarian set procedure because of the conflict? And not everybody in the community is massed around the conflict. Think about it. The democracy. Think about the electoral body. Think about how the votes come in. What are the swing states? What are the non-swing states? Man, there's a whole specific way of voting to where the mass majority of the people are versus we the people as a whole. Great. You won the swing states. Great. You won the electoral college. Then you have that separation. The popular vote. Okay, well, why is there the separation of, hey, we won the popular vote, the electoral vote, the swing states? So now you're starting to pick up a little bit that the authoritarianism is there. It's in the states. It's in the executive body. It's definitely in law enforcement. It is. I think the sheriff in the one state up north pretty much proved that to the whole planet. The us versus them. Yep. We'll cover one more. Oversight. Yes, authoritarian and oversight. Let's see what's going on. What's a holiday? Where are my scholars at? Give me a thumbs up if you got something. Throw something in the chat. I know it's not a popular show. It's new. It's new. But we're building it. Maybe it'll help somebody, give somebody something. Hope somebody will learn something off of the totalitarian and authoritarian principle here, something they didn't know. Let's see what's going on. What's going on X? I haven't even looked at X yet. I know we had Rumble difficulties. I had to get one of my IT superstars to fix the Rumble thing. Yeah, it's active. We're going to cover one more thing: accountability and oversight. The mechanics of oversight. Authoritarian. Why do you think we have body cameras? Why? Authoritarian. Did we just not cover that the authoritarian is the diminishment of law, rights? Now we have something that's arguable under authoritarian control, policy, and procedure. Let's bring it up. George Floyd. That PPCT tactic of the brachial plexus was in the text of the SOP, SOG, the manual of procedure for the department. For those of you that did not know this and want to argue it, oh, it's wrong. No, it's a PPCT restraint side. If it was both sides crushing both sides of the brachial plexus, the guy wouldn't have been talking. But video looked like he was talking great to me. Authoritarian development of the standard operating guideline, manual and procedure of the department. For those of you that say, oh, no, he's wrong, do your own research. Go back and look it up. You may just shock yourself and amaze yourself. It was written in the policy and procedure. How do I know? Done some work with the DOJ. Had a little bit of privilege to see some of that with the DOJ. Memphis DOJ. 5 officers. Accountability. Authoritarian. Nothing in the policy and procedure book. It's kind of like the ICE agent that grabbed the handle of the car. I want to go to the school where I get to grab the handle of a car and stop the car. I got 35 years of military and law enforcement. I've never been to a school to where it taught me to grab the handle of a car while it was moving, try to open it. Do I have any law enforcement officers in the world that can tell me where that school is? Where? 6 to 8 weeks. I had one of our researchers look up, the training time under the authoritarian word of law for ICE. I'm pro law enforcement all the way. Pro law enforcement, pro gun. Buy one of all, get some training, know how to use them and what the intent is, but it's not enough time. Authoritarian word of law. I want to go to that school. Now, why do we need the body camera? The authoritarian shift in law, the authoritarian shift in manipulation of the sector of the people, dissemination of the information, the influence, propaganda. It's there. It's out there. And it's under authoritarian rule of allowed. If it was a totalitarian aspect, you wouldn't see propaganda. You wouldn't see the misuse of undocumented argument today in 2026, because you could go back to 2008 when President Barack Obama argued the same exact thing, the same. But authoritarianism now has created unsettling rest in society with law enforcement and authoritarian review. The oversight mechanism, civilian review boards, argument, investigative powers, including society in an investigation. Authoritarian review. Who's the criminal? The executive, the authoritarian, the judiciary review, oversight by the, society, high profile, early intervention systems to capitalize it all out, implementing data-driven systems that identify officers who would be at risk. Yes, mental, physical, involved in dangerous conduct inside and outside of the job. Influence, behavior, complaints, use of force, incidents, allowing for targeted training or intervention of serious problems before they occur. Law enforcement comes from society. Society is an authoritarian regime. Communities are authoritarian. Families are authoritarian. Religions are authoritarian. If it wasn't an authoritarian, why would what would it be, the Christian Baptist Church? Why would there be so many names and identities? Why? Authoritarian society shifts itself away from specific authoritarian word and creates its own authoritarian set structure. Law enforcement comes from society. Law enforcement, it trains. It gives tools. Training tools in the academy. Selection. That's if you even make it through selection. It's if you even make it through the, your training course. And it's not cheap. It's not quick. It takes effort. Takes time. Authoritarian rule. Send us an email. Let us know. Authoritarian, totalitarian. Did it help you? Do we need to go in more detail? Like I said, this is not a substitute for a classroom. It's not a substitute for a 16-week semester. And it's definitely not a substitute for a lifetime of experience. Everyone in different areas of the globe, different areas of the country, are going to experience different, life experiences of authoritarianism. But it all applies the same way, executive, legislative, judicial. You can't argue away from it. Law enforcement, criminal justice, policing. It's about two things, politics and money. Yes, politics and money. It is not developed for public safety, protect and serve the people. No, it's not. How do you think a politician gets there? The political venue, the authoritarian approach, my party, my ideas. For the people, over the people. The people shall conform. The people shall conform to authoritarian behavior construct. So shall the law enforcement agency that the authoritarian is over, has word over. Why the big shift in the leadership in the FBI? Why the big shift in the leadership of the ATF under the previous president and this president? Not rocket science again. It's common sense. Authoritarian. Adaptability, the construct, the negate of the authoritarian. Put it in an email. Do we need to go deeper? Did we cover just the one grain of sand on the beach for you? And I'm going to put up my scholars one more time because they did put in a lot of work on this. Right up top. Caleb Foster, Dylan McDonald, Chloe Hensley, and Amanda Blankenship. Also, you can go to Facebook, Dr. Mike Gurley, CJTV, and you can download, the research. There's even, like PowerPoints, PDFs of PowerPoints. Keep in mind, these researchers, myself, spend a lot of time. You can use them. It's out there. It's free. So if you're doing your own research, it's a good stepping ground. If you're banging your head on the wall in the database and you can't find something, and it's one of these topics, man, feel free, use it. It's peer review. It is open source. Just make sure you cite it or paraphrase it, right? Make sure it's done right. Somebody's going to find out. Maybe this guy. Never know. Send us an email. Have a great holiday. Remember, authoritarianism. It's all up to you. You are part of the authoritarian circle. Holding those in authoritarian positions to the authoritarian standard is your responsibility. It's not someone else's responsibility. Just as law enforcement, it's not their responsibility to police you every day. It's their responsibility to enforce the executive written word of legislative law and be the first area of judiciary review. Do not confuse yourself with thinking they're here to protect and serve me. You're supposed to be conforming to the executive legislatively written word of law that is judicially reviewed, boots on the ground, first contact by law enforcement. So if you were doing that adherence to your totalitarian selection of U.S. law, state law, city ordinance, county ordinance, you're there, you're living there, adhere to it. That, again, is not common sense. So, without further ado, everyone have a great rest of your holiday. The resources, references are all at Facebook. We usually have, like a long print of this, but we're not going to do that. So you can go look at them and download them yourself. It's great work, people. Thanks to my researchers. Back to the university tomorrow. I will see everybody